record? Does it say it's recording? That one?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Great. Well, let's talk about the research strategy and methods. Actually, before okay. Let's just have a look at this. We start with reviewing the whole research cycle theory, right? So this is a system that we use here at Codarts, which is quite an interesting and unique system, which is not.
Sorry, man. In the Zoom meeting, the PowerPoint is not showing, or the presentation.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
on. Yeah.
That's great. You told me. I'm just gonna share my desktop.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this system we have, the research cycle, and this is basically how it goes. You start at the top with your reference recording. Once you have your topic and your question, you make your reference recording. Did everyone make their reference recording? Have you signed up for a time?
No, yeah.
Those have already happened. Okay. All right. And you have yours. Right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk about this. But let's just look at how this process is going to go. So you start with your reference recording, and then you ask for feedback and reflection. And the feedback and reflection is, of course, based on your topic and your question. So I'm working on playing Arhu music on the trombone. Here's me doing that. What do you think? And then people give you feedback. They say, the ornamentation seems different. Your tone color is different. Why don't you try mute? All these things. So you ask a couple experts for the feedback, and then you also reflect upon it yourself. We say, well, I think that I could be a little bit faster in the way I do the glissandos, or my vibrato is thinner than the Arhu, whatever. And so then now we have a bunch of very specific comments on this recording. And then on the basis of that feedback and reflection, you design your research, which is the data collection and methods. So then you say, well, okay, I'm going to analyze some Arhu performances for the width of the vibrato. And I'm going to try to really measure the speed of the music so that I can imitate the speed of the glissandos correctly. And then you also say, I'm going to analyze some recordings. I'm going to maybe read some books or articles about it. I'm going to take a couple lessons and so forth. So those are your data collections and methods. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. We have 8 different ones I'm going to show you. And then after you've done all that, so this whole data collection methods area, that's kind of your main meat of the research. This is where all the research takes place. So where the most time is and effort. And then after you've done all that, you take decisions. You say, okay, I'm going to play it this fast. I'm going to do this piece. I'm going to do it like that. So you apply the results of your research into practice. And we sometimes we call this the intervention, because now you're making changes to your playing. And then after you've taken those decisions, made the changes, you make a new reference recording. And boom, now you play it, you've corrected all those things. And then someone says, well, okay, those things are fixed, but I don't know, they come with a different thing, like you're not using, you should understand the text of this folk song, and that might help you change the way you play the piece, right? So then all of a sudden you say, okay, at first I was working on these technical things, and now I have text as a topic to work on, and that's going to completely change the way I do all the different parameters. So then you would do another research cycle based on your analysis of the text. And you would start with probably the same reference recording you ended with, or maybe a different one, depending on what's needed. And then do the same thing, feedback reflection, which leads to your methods, which leads to taking decisions, and then back to another recording. So that's the whole research cycle. We've talked about this many times. So, but it's good to know about that at the beginning of this lecture. So now if we go to the research strategies, so now we pull it back. So your research strategy is like, well, what do I want to know? You're using feedback from experts and colleagues and your own questions, and you're asking, what form does this knowledge have, right? So in this case, you might say, well, what do I want to know? I want to know the correct tone color. I want to know the width of the vibrato. I want to understand the speed of ornaments, stuff like that. So, and I want to understand the spirit of the folk music or something like that. So then you'd have these things that you want to know, and you also learn from the feedback. And then you say, okay, where is that knowledge? What is the form it's in? So it's in recordings, it's maybe in a person, and maybe in literature. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how do I get that? So basically repeat, what kind of knowledge is it? Where is it? And in what form do you need it? Okay, there's Diogo. So, okay, so that's basically the approach to your strategy, is to think about that. And in general, we think about a collection of different methods so that you can triangulate the information. Now, what kind of information are you getting? Usually it falls into two categories: qualitative information and quantitative information, or qualitative or quantitative. So let's just look through those. Quantitative information is data that can be measured. For example, this folk song is played in tempo 96 beats per minute. So now we have 96. And I have a recording of someone else playing it in a different region, and they play it at 82. And here's a recording, someone playing it at 112. So now we have three versions of the same piece in 82, 96, and 112. So now we have numbers. And then qualitative would be the character of the piece, for example. So these are descriptions, opinions, stories, things that don't translate to numbers. My teacher thinks that I could be more expressive with this. You know, that's a general comment about the way you play. It's not specific something that you would reduce to a number. And the interesting thing is when you take quantitative information and translate it to qualitative information, and when you take qualitative information and translate it to quantitative information. So, for example, in this version of we have the three different tempi of the recordings of the folk songs. You might say, kind of obviously, well, you know, the one at tempo 82 is a little bit sad, melancholy. And then the one in the middle at 96 has a flow to it. And the fast one at 112 is really exciting and tense or something like that. You could say that, right? So now we've taken these numbers and we've translated them into qualities. So this is a kind of basic thing. Or, for example, you could take an emotional quality and determine the numbers. So you could have a piece which is very melancholy, and then you can say, okay, why is it melancholy? What's going on in the intervals of the pitches or the tempo, rhythm? And you might say, okay, the tempo is this number, it has this kinds of rhythms. It tends to emphasize minor sevenths and minor seconds, whatever. So we've taken a piece of music that we have a quality to it, and we analyze it for its numbers. And then you could say, okay, if I want to have a melancholy piece, I want to use intervals of a minor second and a minor seventh, and I want to use a slower tempo, right? So then we've created a theory about how melancholy pieces work. And that could be something you could then recreate and apply. So in your data collection, you will be thinking about these different types of information. Or like if you want to make a survey or something, you want to ask people, what did you think of my costume on stage? Did you find it appropriate or inappropriate? Then a certain number of people will say yes, and a certain number will say no. And then you might say, okay, well, when I wear these diamond studded shoes, it doesn't seem to fit with my use of Bach, right? So when I'm playing Bach. So you could do those kinds of surveys with numbers. Okay. These are the 8 research methods I'm going to talk to you today. And they're basically these: desk research, interview, case study, experiments, reenactment, ethnography, reflexive writing, and survey. So my lecture is basically going to be about all of these. So let's just jump right in. Desk research. So the desk research, it's pretty much always going to be a part of every cycle. Because whatever it is you want to do and work on, you're not just going to work on it in the practice room. You're going to be learning from information which is outside of you. And that's in the form of texts, which are books, articles, websites, previous Codarts research. Sorry, this is the PowerPoint I gave in Utrecht this week. It's also on print and on the internet, so all the texts. It's also audiovisual media. So we have recordings, CDs, LPs, try to avoid streaming services if possible, videos, YouTube, Vimeo, right? So, and it's also documents, which are scores, manuscripts, diagrams, pictures, drawings, and stuff. So these are all the different types of informations out there, and it's a lot, right? We were talking about this stuff all the time, finding books and articles and looking at videos and analyzing them, understanding what's been done. We've already been doing that. And of course, documents play a role. So with all these things, you summarize what's there, you analyze it if it's necessary, and then reflect upon what you've learned. And of course, you're always giving citations for your sources. You know what I mean when I say cite your sources. Do you know the word cite? Yeah. This one, CITE. Do you know what that means? No, I will tell you. It's when you make a footnote for, like, if you look at a book or a video and you talk about it in your research, then you will put a footnote that tells the name of the book, who published it, what year, stuff like that. That's called a citation. So, okay, Ziyang, you have one homework. No, I'm asking you to do one thing every time I see you, which is when I say a word you don't understand, say, Mr. McGowan, what does cite mean? Okay? It's really important. Also for you, because you just come here, you're in a new world. People are saying new words all the time. Just ask. People, and not because I learned to do this in Dutch. Every day I'm speaking Dutch and they say a word I don't know. And I say, what does that mean? And every time I do it, people are like, stop, and they explain it to me. And every time I do it, they like me more. Can you understand that?
Yeah.
So like if you don't understand and you ask, and then people explain it to you, then you make a connection with that person. And they feel that you are really paying attention to them and that you want to know what they have to say. So please ask me, okay? Okay. All right. Okay, so this is desk research. Any questions about this? It's all pretty clear, right? Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna change this because of course YouTube is a streaming service. The thing I don't like, we've talked about this, is Spotify. Please don't use Spotify. Is there someone here who uses Spotify?
I use Spotify.
Okay.
What is the problem?
Well, I don't have Spotify.
Okay.
So if you send me a Spotify link,
Okay.
I can't listen to it. That's number one. Number two, I think it's an evil company.
But you just mean like in the references, like we can use it to listen to things.
Yeah. Yeah, don't put it in the references. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I think you shouldn't use Spotify because for two reasons, they screw over artists. They don't pay any money. And number two, the CEO of Spotify is like investing hundreds of millions of dollars into advanced weapons research and stuff. Like the guy is super evil. So it's you would
use Apple Music.
I did. Now I use YouTube Music. I also I pay for it every month, and then I don't have the ads. So I really like that. I think everything on Spotify is on YouTube.
I don't know if that's true.
Okay, well,
At least in the Saxon world.
all right. Well, check it out. If you have a specific issue, send me the thing and let's see. In any case, usually what we prefer that you always cite the original release. So if it's a YouTube or even Spotify streaming of a CD, then you would cite the original CD. So the CD, the public, who released the CD and stuff like that. And then you could also put the link of the YouTube music or Apple Music if it's there. Most important is that we can listen to your links. Actually, that's the real reason. The political stuff is, I say it because I believe it, but you do what you want. But if you send me, I had it last year where somebody just sent a bunch of Spotify links and I couldn't listen to them. So then I couldn't follow the research. So if you can't find it on YouTube Music, could be that you download it or you record it from Spotify and then upload it as a file or something like that. Those things could be possible. So it's really about making things accessible. Okay. And last, as we know in the desk research, when you read one book and you look at the bibliography, do you know what bibliography is?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the list of, in the end of the book, that's the list of books that were cited in the book. So if you read one book or article, at the end, it has a bunch of other books and articles related to it. And then each one of those has a bunch of books and articles. So if you follow that pathway, you get to a snowball effect of so many sources. So, which can be a good thing and also overwhelming. Okay, of your text sources, we basically have two categories. One are the primary sources. You know, what did Socrates say in his book? Socrates was a famous Greek philosopher, and he wrote a bunch of books. So you can go back and look at translations of those books and see what he said. But you can also look at, you know, what people are saying about Socrates' ideas today. So Socrates would be your primary source, which is the original firsthand account, records of events, experiments, or artistic creations, right? Performances. They are authentic. You go to them in order for authenticity or to make a detailed analysis, to create your own interpretation. And then the secondary sources would be, you know, what did Carl Jung say about Socrates? And then it's a secondary source. So when someone else says something about someone, then it's secondary sources. So in your research papers, you're going to look up a lot of primary sources and maybe secondary sources, but then you're going to write about them all. And you're going to say, oh, I listened to this recording and I read this book and it was relevant for this and it said this and I did this with it. That becomes a secondary source. So it's what you think about that book. And then some student 2 years from now is going to read your research and they're going to quote you. They're going to say, Jem said this in her research about interdisciplinarity, and then they're quoting you as a secondary source. But they might also want to go to your primary sources and look at those too. So this is kind of a thing to be aware of. So secondary sources are like interpretations, analysis, reviews. We often find them in books, articles, essays, biographies, and they help us understand a broader context often. Okay, so primary sources, secondary sources. Any questions about that? Okay, let's move on. Interview. So interview is to learn someone's insights and experiences. You take someone from your network. And if you end up interviewing someone who's not on your network, then you put them on your network. Okay, so for your interview, you should prepare it. Well, what do I really want or need to know? With whom do I want to discuss this? Who's the person most concerned with, informed about, interested, or experienced in this topic? And then you prepare. So you write the questions, topics, ideas, make an appointment, and then you go give the interview. Oh, excuse me. So just to tell you, there are 3 types of interviews. Number 1 is structured interview, where sometimes we see this in magazines, that they'll say they'll take like 3 questions and ask it to 3 different artists, and then each one will have their own answers. So that's very formal, structured interview. A semi-structured interview, this is what you guys are mostly going to do. You're going to go interview your teacher, and you're going to have some questions, and the teacher is going to say a few things, and then you maybe ask a different question. And so you kind of, you come with the structure, but you also go with the flow, right? And then the third type is where you only go with the flow, is that, you just start talking and see where it goes. I always say, if you're going to interview Yo-Yo Ma, you would just do the open interview, because maybe you want to know about the kind of strings he uses, but it's more interesting to know his deep insights into music, right? So then you just let him talk, if in that case. But in most of your cases, you'll do semi-structured interviews. So you write the questions down, email them to them, or when you have the lesson, you go ask or make an interview. You did like a Zoom interview or with your friend in Australia.
No, she wasn't.
Oh, she listened. Okay, right. So obviously, if it was an hour and 45 minutes, it was probably almost open interview, then semi-structured. Yeah. So that's maybe what you get with the open interview, is you get hour and 45 minutes, and then you spend weeks transcribing it. So maybe by your next interview, write the 4 questions and just get the answers to those.
I'm saying this to questions. For other people.
Oh, really? Dutch. That's probably also Dutch.
This is swimming. She was like, I gotta get this done.
Right. Interview methods. Well, there's also this dyadic interview, where you interview 2 people at the same time. Like if you want to create a dialogue. Focus group discussion. Let's say you, I don't know. Yeah, if you're working with a choir or something and you want to interview the whole group, you could create a discussion. This might be interesting for you guys. I don't know. Okay, that's the interview. Move on. Questions? No? Okay. Case study. Do you know what a case study is? No?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
No.
Okay, no. Okay, yeah. All right. A case study is where you study one thing in detail. So, well, let's just go through it. It's where you want to go deep into one thing. And the case can be an individual, can be a group, can be an event, a work of music, a performance, or any unit of musical significance. So, maybe there was a tour of some famous Chinese musician in America, where they performed a bunch of Chinese traditional music on Western instruments. But it wasn't just that it was also at a specific time and specific collaborations. I don't know. If you have one thing that happened that was unique, then you might want to study exactly that thing. So it's very selective. So you choose it and you go deep, more depth than breadth. Qualifiable data and research method, we're looking for specific meaning and understanding, not general overview. It's holistic. So you're finding out everything. Can you guys think of an example of a case study that might work for your research?
As like a specific performance that had sex in my visual.
Yep. Exactly. And so you would have a specific performer, piece of music, collaboration. You look what happened. And you might look at how they prepared it, what the idea was.
But then there's type of thing like we were talking about triangulating methods, like I could use
Yeah. Yeah.
because like for example, like if I just chose like the docent thing of Javianas, like it's not gonna be a lot on the internet about that.
No.
Of their like preparation, their methods and like that.
Right. So you could go interview Tom. Maybe he's got some tryout videos he could show you. And then you could look at, so you, in this case, you would do a case study of that project, actually, and talk about how you put it together, what the concepts were. It could be totally relevant for your idea of how to create a interdisciplinary project, which is different than how can you combine the saxophone with electronics, right? Because then you would present an overview of different approaches. So case study is just to focus on one thing. Okay, what about you, Hugo?
Yeah, for me, I mean, regarding my research, with the piece that I'm using, with the tone back, I would say like study a bit the music of this instrument, like get more insight and then apply it to the piece. That is not the same language, but all the technique and approach. So, like study the music of the instrument, like
Oh, the Doombeck.
yeah, Iranian from Iran.
Yeah.
Music.
Maybe. I think it's a little bit more specific. Like maybe how does one specific performer play it? Because if you just want to study the general approach to that instrument, then you're going to have to cite a bunch of different musics and everything. Yeah, maybe it's blurry. The line in between the two is blurry. But what was your research question again?
Research of theater elements and stage presence influence my interpretations of the pieces.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe there's a performance, a theatrical performance that you really like. That could be your case study. Look at what they did, what the piece was, what the theatrical elements were. What about you, Zion? Can you think of a case study?
to with up to my interview and with the artist and multiple main rearrangement piece and to talk about the compose the piece and continue with the Chinese books series and like myself.
So to be talking with somebody?
The artist they are
Yeah. Okay. Right. So you could make a case study out of that recording. And then you talk about the instruments that played, the music, the notation, the interpretation, all that stuff. So exactly that piece. So you analyze that one piece. You kind of already did that a bit or started to. That's a case study. Okay. Really briefly, case study, select the case, determine the data collection methods, collect the data, analyze it, and then report the findings. That's the process of this case study. Should we have a break or should we go on? What? Yeah. All right. Let's keep going. Fine. Experiments. This is a really important part of your research, are your experiments. So when you're practicing, trying things out, that's your experimentation. And basically, all of your experimentation is going to be this first one, quasi-experimentation. Because if we look at like laboratory experimentation, right? Like if you're going to do scientific research, we do lab experiments. And when you do a laboratory, you have to experiment with something, and then you also have to have a control group, right? Do you know about this scientific research? Like what's an example? Well, like if you're testing out a medicine and you give a medicine to 100 people, then you say, okay, does it fix your headache? And then to another 100 people, you give them a placebo, which is like, it's the same, it looks the same, but there's no medicine in it, right? And then you say, okay, does this cure your headache, right? So now we have 100 people with the medicine and 100 people without the medicine, and then we see what the results are. And then you might know if it's working or not. Because if it's the same, if 60% say, yeah, it really works, and 60% of the people with nothing say, yeah, it really works, then it doesn't work. You can just tell them it works, and then it's not the medicine, it's something else. Well, in artistic research, we don't do that kind of research, mostly. It's not, the kind of research we're doing is like your own personal research. So you are, you're making, you're trying things out and you're making choices all the time based on your artistic intentions. And that's what we call the quasi-experiment, where you use your experience and intuition in a combination with your artistic goal to help guide the process of your experimentation for results that may be more related to your topic, right? So if you're playing scales, you're trying to have a beautiful tone, you're experimenting with the position to do that, right? and then you figure it out. This is the kind of experimentation we're doing all the time. So, and that's pretty much going to play a role in all of your researches, experimentation. I tried this out, it didn't work. I tried this, it also didn't work. And then I did this, and then it worked. That kind of explaining of your research is that's what's typical in these papers. The other thing you might want to do is a parametric experiment, which is a little bit more organized. For example, well, with parametric experiment, you're taking a variable and you're experimenting on all the different permutations. So let's say in the Arhu playing, there are 7 different types of glissando. And so 7 different ways to get from one note to the next note. And it's like, dude, or dude, or dude, whatever. I know they probably have this. So in your arrangement, you could say, okay, I have a phrase of 5 notes, and I have 7 different ways to go from each note to the next note. So how many different versions of the piece would you make? With 5 notes and 7 different ways to get from each one. Is it 35, or is it 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2? Maybe it's just 35. Yeah. Okay. So now we have 35 different versions of the same 5 notes. So then you would go and you would record all of them. And then you would say, okay, which ones are working, which ones are not. That would be a case of a parametric experiment. Or I had a pianist last year who researched improvising interludes between classical pieces. So he ended with Mozart and he started with Chopin. And then he said, okay, first I'm going to do high energy to low energy with the improvisation. And then I'm going to do medium energy to medium energy, and I'm going to do low energy to higher energy. So he had the different directions of energy, and then he had the order of the pieces. So he did that, but he also switched the pieces. First Chopin, and then Mozart, and then low energy, high energy, and so forth. So then he had 6 different options, and he practiced all of them. And then he chose what would be the most interesting one, right? So this is a kind of parametric experiment process. It's where you take a systematic permutation and you apply it to how you do your experiments. And because it's systematic, it makes you try out all the different possibilities. So this can be interesting for you. Okay, moving along. Reenactment. When you're doing, well, let's see here. Reenactment is the action of performing a new version of an old event. So the person or persons doing the reenactment aims to get the details as close to the original as possible. The goal is to gain knowledge about the artist that recorded the performance, or about the piece or the style in which it was performed. And the knowledge that is gained by engaging in reenactment is often embodied. So when you recreate a performance, then you're actually, it's in your body is learning how it works. And you're always writing about that. So, right? So maybe there's some famous performance of Corporal, which is really different. And then you imitate that performance, and then you see how it works. Actually, you guys tell me, what would you reenact? Give me an example of a reenactment related to your topic.
How to do the boost for my motivation, but I saw
Okay.
these lots of moves. Um, Does it have to be written for an instrument? Because then I would have to do.
Why, yeah, maybe not, huh?
Because it's written for trumpet. For trumpets.
Right. So you might, but you could play it on saxophone.
Yeah, it's like a guided improvisation thing
Okay.
with like visuals.
Yeah. And what would you learn by reenacting it, do you think?
I think like would learn more of the process, especially with an improvisation, like the interaction between like the music and the visuals, and like how seeing the live visuals changes what I play, and like what's too much information and what's not, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I think that could be really helpful. Okay, Xiang, what would you reenact? I'm putting you on the spot here. Okay. Well, why don't you just play an Arhu piece exactly the way it's played? Right? So, okay, your topic is about translating traditional Chinese music to the trombone. Take a recording of a traditional piece and play it exactly the same. That's a reenactment. And then what would you learn from that?
So,
Tell me the obvious things.
I think maybe I can from to get some new especially the techniques and like most likely someone that make a new new technique and explore some explore some new technique.
Yeah.
Techniques.
Right. So you'd have to create some techniques. You would learn about the vibrato and the glissandos, and you would also learn what's possible, what's not possible. But it would be a reenactment. So you just try to recreate it, because in your research, you're not just going to do reenactments. The end of your research, a year and a half from now, is going to be, these are the possibilities, and this is the new way that I create, right? So the way you're going to put the Chinese music on trombone, it has problems, and you're going to have to solve those problems, and you're going to create new opportunities too, new expressions. So it's going to go much beyond reenactment. You're going to go beyond copying. So remember that. Maybe you don't know yet what, but eventually you have to go and create new things that do not exist. Okay, we'll go. did you have a reenactment idea?
I guess it would be like a version of someone that I like. And indeed copy them, or copy,
Yeah,
learn how they play.
yeah,
And that will give me some perspective on which sounds did they choose and why did they choose and should
Yeah.
they choose these sounds or okay, if they did this, then I will do different. I would agree. I agree. So I will
Yeah.
use something like this. Also, body expression. Why did they do this movement or use these facial expressions
right.
regarding the piece?
Yeah,
Maybe I agree. I don't. So
Yeah.
I will do my version.
great. Good example. Okay. I need to go to the bathroom. Can we take 10-minute break? And then we'll finish this and then look at each of you individual. We'll probably end early today too. Oh, you leave in 20 minutes. That's why you wanted to go there. Fine. I can wait. I'm not that urgent. It's okay. No problem. No, it's okay. Let's go on because these are not so fault. Ethnography. So you're describing a culture. It's complex, subconscious, dynamics of a specific musical community. This is exactly for you, huh? Your ethnography is going to be a big top part of your research. So you have to really explain to us what is the Chinese culture and the folk music, and not only how do the glissandos and vibrato work, but what is the way that they learn or communicate, or how the pieces are made, all that stuff. Ethnography, you're delving into the unwritten norms, the traditions, the expectations surrounding performance in various musical contexts. You're doing field work, so you're in the middle of what you study. Of course, you grew up in that, so it's you understand it because you've grown up in China, but maybe you want to go even deeper and talk to some Chinese folk musicians and interview them and stuff. Techniques are observation, participating, extended interviewing, documentation, participating. Yeah. Oops. So that's ethnography. Do you guys see ethnography maybe in your research about, like, there's a community of or a culture of interdisciplinary collaboration? Well, looking at the way people collaborate. We have to talk about what your current version is, but where you are with your research. But I know you really wanted to create interdisciplinary collaboration. So then there is a sort of ethnography of the way that works. You know, you go to other schools and you meet people, and then you make drawings or you talk about things, or, you know, there's definitely a culture of the way these things take place. And some people live in that world, and a lot of people don't at all. Will ethnography play a role in your research?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't strike me as so obvious. Okay. Reflexive writing. Reflexive. Okay, do you know what the word reflexive means? I know it, but I can't explain it. Yeah. All right. It means that it goes back to yourself. Reflexive. So reflexive writing urges you to explore subjective thoughts and feelings that play a role in your research topic and your artistic practice. It combines describing your personal experiences with careful observation and critical thinking about these experiences. So basically, your whole research paper is going to be largely made up of reflexive writing, because you're telling the story of your research. So you're talking about the things you've learned, the things you think, the things you've tried out, what experiments you did, what were the results, and it's all very subjective. So this is reflexive writing. That's your research paper. Now, you might also have a research journal. Maybe you have a journal of your progress every day on your research, or a practice journal. I've been practicing this kind of theatricality by working on my facial expressions, and I've had these results and these ideas about it. And every day you write in your journal, and then you could put that in your research paper. So yeah, so when you make sure you're writing all the time with your research and documenting it, or writing, making voice memos and stuff, because that's basically going to be the content of your research paper. Could also be stories about learning, how you learn something, and used in your research report, telling the story of your research. So that's the idea of reflexive writing. If you're doing a reenactment, you would also use reflexive writing. So you would say, okay, I was practicing this piece to put it together, and I learned that I needed to use my ring finger much more than normal in order to be able to get the right glissando, right? And then you say, well, I practiced that for a few days, and then my finger got sore, and then I couldn't do it. So I just, you could keep a journal of the way you're trying to learn things, and then that's gonna have a lot of knowledge in it about the way it works for you, which is what we want to know. Any questions about this? Okay. And last and least, survey. So survey is when you want to get an overall picture from many people. And you can do it from the public. So like you could give a performance in China of Chinese folk music on trombone and ask the public if they thought it was authentic. Or you could also do a survey of other performers, like ask 10 different artists who've done interdisciplinary work, how did you get started doing interdisciplinary work? And then you maybe you have 3 or 4 questions, and you send it to put it on Google Forms, send it to 10 people, and see what they say. Or asking 4 different colleagues what kind of exercises they do for their theatricality. This kind of survey you could do, and it's probably relevant for you guys. It's like, how do you get that information in an easy way? Can also be your fellow students. So you can access thoughts, opinions, feelings, behaviors. You generate a lot of data, right? So if you make a survey to a public of 50 people, then you get 50 pieces of paper back, and you have to organize the results, right? So it's kind of a big effort. And you don't go very deep with any of it. You're just getting some ideas. You're taking a representative random sample. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it's random if you're interviewing the public, but if you're asking 10 colleagues, that would not be random. But in general, we get quantitative information. So we have questionnaires, pre-structured or standardized interview, literature survey. That's also one way. I mean, typically in research, a research paper will start with a literature survey where you talk about all the different books related to your topic and what they say, and then give a review, and then you go into your research. That's a really typical research method, literature survey. And then you might need to do some pre-research in order to prepare your survey. What kind of questions would work well, stuff like that. So, okay, those are the methods. In general, we're doing triangulation. So when you have your research, you have your feedback from your reference recording, and then we're going to combine various methods. And it's always going to have desk research where you're reading books and looking at videos. It's always going to have experimentation, but it might also have like some interviews, some analysis, maybe some parametric experiments. So addressing the complexity of musical questions from various angles is better than just one single method approach, because each approach will have its strength and its weaknesses. And then you want to offset the weaknesses. And then you're aiming for a comprehensive, multifaceted examination. Combine methods of depth and breadth. Ah, that's interesting. So, so you want to maybe do a review of all the different approaches to theatricality and percussion music, and you give an overview like you will do in your contextualization. But then you want to do a case study on one exact piece and one performance. So we have a breadth, which means a broad, different overview of a topic. And we have one specific one where we go really deep into. Okay, that's my presentation. Any questions about that?
Is this stuff for the actual research cycles? This is not for, like, we can talk about that we use these, but we're not doing these in those areas.
Right. Yeah. Right. So in your research proposal, you will describe a number of these methods as plans of what you want to do. And maybe you've done some of them a little bit already. You know, you've already practiced some stuff, but you're going to practice even more. So you can talk about that. But in general, the whole thing's a plan, right? Your research proposal was what you're planning to do. Any other questions? Clear? All right, I'm gonna ask you again and again, Si Young. And I'm waiting for you to ask me a question. Are you allowed to ask questions in China? Okay. Here, you're not allowed to not ask questions. So you have to ask questions. Okay? So start changing and getting used to that. Because then you will go much, 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 much further. Okay? All right. Do you have a question about that? Think of one. Okay, ask me a question.
I have a question. In my first research cycle, like you say, do do many kinds of try to recording the notes and maybe maybe I have another idea like that you said at the mute.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last kind of mute slide, I write in my first cycle or the second cycle for the other cycle.
Ah, well, for now, just focus on the first cycle. You guys don't even have to talk about your second or third cycles. That's not important. If you have a really clear idea, you can write it, but we won't pay much attention to it. Mostly we're going to focus on getting the first cycle right. Okay, thank you for that question.
Thank you very much.
Great. Every time I see you, I'm going to ask you to ask me a question, okay? So if you want, you can prepare it ahead of time. Good. All right. Fine. Any other questions, Ugo? No? All right. Jem. All right. Then well, let's take a break. And I will stop this.